AlphaTauri is one of the most promising teams in the past couple of races, and with how their fortunes have turned from Mexico onwards, the team has new targets ahead of them in the closing stages of the season. With this in mind, Ricciardo's importance in the team has been heavily increased, and his bigger picture has been brought to reality even closer. But how does one of the worst cars on the grid suddenly compete for points every weekend as we speak? Why don't you stick around with us as we reveal the secret of the Italian squad and how they managed to bag millions of dollars in cash prize from Formula One thanks to a few upgrades brought at the right place and at the right time. It goes without saying that in the beginning of the season, AlphaTauri was one of the biggest disappointments as a team, scoring only a couple of points in the first 17 races and being deadly stuck at the last place on the grid. To top that off, the team struggled with the drivers' lineup, putting Nick de Vries in the first 10 races, only for him to go and cause some crashes, as well as showcase some very poor performance, which may have improved if the team gave him more time. But given the reality of Red Bull's cruel environment, he was ultimately sacked before the Hungarian GP. This was the race in which Ricciardo made his debut, and an additional issue for the team was the fact that he couldn't really find the form straight away, battling some inconsistencies in the first two races and then suffering from a broken wrist during the Zandvoort training, resulting in him missing out on 5 races in a row. The only bright spot for AlphaTauri here was that Liam Lawson, who debuted in F1 as a replacement for Ricciardo, scored P9 in Singapore and was the highest finishing AlphaTauri driver at that time, with rumours even stretching as far as him replacing Ricciardo as the full-time driver for the Italian squad. On top of battling through his injury, Ricciardo also had to battle the pressure on his shoulders to prove what he's made of, especially after Horner confirmed that Red Bull has huge plans ahead for Lawson from 2025 onwards. And Ricciardo did not disappoint. His comeback race in Austin was truly a disaster, but that was mostly thanks to the setup of the car and the sprint weekend format, where the team had no time to adjust the car to Ricciardo's needs, and they went with what worked best for both cars, the Tsunoda style. But from Mexico onwards, we've seen some true power from both Ricciardo and Tsunoda, and had it not been for the crash from the Japanese driver, the team would have been much closer to attacking the P7 in the Constructors' Championship, a mission they have embarked on in the last 2 races. So how does such a struggling team manage to put their car in the points consistently in the last 3 racing weekends? As we speak, AlphaTauri sits at 21 points, and that has been mostly thanks to Tsunoda finishing 8th in Austin, Ricciardo finishing 7th in Mexico, and Tsunoda finishing P6 and P9 in Brazil in the sprint and main race events respectively. Even Albon acknowledged that the threat from AlphaTauri is a real one, and that they need to approach it with a greater tension in the last 2 races, as the point difference between them right now is just 7 points. According to the new CEO of the team, Peter Bayer, the resurrection of the team started all the way back in Singapore, where they arrived with major updates to almost every aspect of the car. These updates have been a bit overshadowed due to the fact that the majority of the teams have brought upgrades to their respective units as well, leaving little to no spotlight for the Italian squad. But the floor, the diffuser, the side pod and the rear suspension were all addressed, and in combination with the Ricciardo factor, the team managed to turn their fortunes around. Elaborating on this further, Bayer went on to say, "The Singapore upgrade was the starting signal. Since then, we have brought more parts to optimize the package. In terms of setup, we have made great progress. Daniel was extremely involved and helped the engineers, and since then, the drivers have been very satisfied with the car at the meetings. We now have the tyres well under control, and we are no longer the slowest on the straights. In terms of top speed, we are now midfield." This is definitely a massive boost because the issues that the team had, high drag and low downforce, have all been sorted out with a couple of upgrades, and from there on it seems like the team is now finally able to push through the grid and score points on a regular basis. But upgrades themselves mean nothing if the drivers are unable to extract the maximum out of them, which is something that can be done only if they know what they want from the car and how to tell the engineers that. Top teams like Ferrari and Mercedes Mercedes have been vastly criticised because for the past 2 years they have been bringing upgrades, but with the budget they have compared to AlphaTauri, they should have been fighting much more closely with Red Bull and not suffer from so many reliability issues and inconsistencies. Be that as it may, the mood in AlphaTauri has turned out to be extremely good after the disappointing start of the season, and with how the team is poised to take the majority of the RB19's parts for the next season, we're definitely going to see them fighting much closer in the midfield than what we are seeing right now. Elaborating on this even further, Bayer continued, "The good results gave the team a boost. Everyone can see that things are going better now and that the upgrades are working. This also gives the drivers more self-confidence and can choose the attack. That risk often pays off and it turns out well. It also encourages everyone in the factory." The combination of upgrades and drivers' input is what every team needs in order to succeed, and that's not something that's very hard to understand, but it is sometimes a hard mission to accomplish. After all, we're talking about a team that was dead last in one of the tightest regulated eras in the sport, and the only team that was able to make some huge strides after starting off in such a slow manner was McLaren. So AlphaTauri definitely has a lot to look forward to in the foreseeable future. According to Yuki Tsunoda, the team is now the dark horse in the sport due to the improved performance and consistent scoring, and the battle for the Red Bull's second seat in 2025 has only become more active as well. Here's what Tsunoda had to say. "It's a big surprise. I think we're right now a dark horse, especially compared to our other competitors, so I think it's good. So far, we are scoring points 3 races in a row, so a very good rhythm. We need to just keep doing like this for the rest of the races. Now we are closer to P7 in the team's championship. I think it's possible and we will do our best." As of now, the drivers of AlphaTauri sit at P14 with Tsunoda and P17 with Ricciardo, and rest assured that this outlook is bound to change vastly in 2024, but it seems like the increase in performance will be done purely on their own and not by borrowing parts from one of the most successful cars to ever hit the grid, the RB19, as the clone they were rumoured to take is not going to happen. Elaborating on this, Jody Eggington, the technical director of AlphaTauri, stated, "Since we started Synergy in 2019, the parts we've selected off the menu have been different, and for next year will be slightly different again. Relative to this year, a bit more. Relative to a couple of the previous years, probably about the same. At the end of the day, our aerodynamic concept, although we haven't got the highest performing car on the grid, doesn't stand out different from anybody else. We know which way we want to go, and there is also some optimization and other things, but primarily we are aero driven, so the chassis will be substantially different. But in terms of concept change, we know which way we are going. We are reasonably aligned with the direction other teams are going as well. We've just got to be more successful in achieving those objectives." With this in mind, the situation is loud and clear. The faster driver gets a legitimate shot at the second Red Bull seat, but whether it's Tsunoda or Ricciardo, time and performance will tell. Where do you think AlphaTauri will finish in the last 2 races? And more importantly, do you think that they will be much more competitive in 2024? Let us know in the comments below.